Mr. Sterling offered me a fortune to fix his failing son, a boy he believed was lazy and defiant. What I discovered in their opulent penthouse, however, was a brilliance the world had completely overlooked. The air in Mr. Sterling's penthouse tasted of money, not the crisp, papery smell of new bills, but something older, heavier. It was the scent of polished marble, rare leather, and an air filtration system so advanced it seemed to scrub the very soul out of the oxygen. From the 80th floor window, the city looked like a circuit board, a toy for the man sitting opposite me. Alistair Sterling was exactly as the tabloids painted him. Sharp, severe, with eyes that assessed your net worth before they bothered to register your name. I was just Sarah, a 22-year-old child psychology student, trying to make rent. I felt like a stray cat that had wandered into a lion's den. "The previous 6 tutors have failed," he said, his voice as cold as the glass table between us. He slid a sleek tablet my way. On the screen was a report card from the most exclusive private school in the country. It was a bloodbath of F's and D minuses. The student's name was Leo Sterling. He was 10 years old. They all said the same thing. He's defiant, lazy, unfocused. One even suggested a full neurological workup for a learning disability. We did it. The results came back perfectly normal. Above average, in fact. I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. "What do you think the problem is, Mr. Sterling?" He leaned back, steepling his fingers. A sliver of a smile, devoid of any warmth, touched his lips. "I think my son is a 10-year-old boy who has decided that effort is beneath him. He has everything he could ever want. He's never known a day of hardship. This is the result." His gaze was a physical weight. "Your job, Miss Evans, is simple. You're not just his nanny. You are his course corrector. I don't care about his happiness. I care about his results. The Sterling name is not one to be associated with failure. You have until the end of the semester. Fix him." The word fix sent a shiver down my spine. He wasn't talking about a child. He was talking about a malfunctioning piece of machinery. But the pay was astronomical. Enough to clear my student loans in 6 months. I needed this. So I nodded, my heart pounding a nervous rhythm against my ribs. My first meeting with Leo was in his playroom. It was the size of my entire apartment, filled with every toy imaginable. A gleaming virtual reality setup sat in one corner, a state-of-the-art drone in another. But Leo wasn't playing with any of them. He was sitting at a small table in the center of the room, hunched over a piece of paper, scribbling furiously with a pencil. He didn't look up when I came in. "Leo," I said softly. "I'm Sarah. I'm going to be helping you out for a while." No response. The only sound was the scratching of graphite on paper. I moved closer and saw what he was drawing. It wasn't the usual childish fare of houses or stick figures. It was complex. A series of interlocking gears, wheels, and levers, all meticulously detailed with strange little notes and numbers in the margins. It looked like a page torn from Leonardo da Vinci's notebook. For the first week, I felt like I was talking to a ghost. I tried everything the textbook suggested. I brought in colorful worksheets for his math homework. He stared through them. I tried to make history fun by acting out famous battles with his expensive action figures. He just watched me with blank, uninterested eyes. During our designated study hours, he would just sit there, doodling his intricate machines, completely lost in his own world. Mr. Sterling would get a daily report, and I could feel his icy disapproval growing with every email I sent detailing the lack of progress. The pressure was suffocating. I was just number 7 in a line of failures. One rainy afternoon, I was at my wit's end. Leo was supposed to be writing a 1-page essay on my favorite summer activity. His page was blank except for a new, impossibly complex drawing of what looked like a miniature catapult. I watched him, really watched him. The way his brow furrowed in concentration, the precise way his hand moved, the tiny, almost imperceptible nod he gave himself when he connected 2 parts of his drawing in a way that satisfied him. This wasn't laziness. This was focus. It was just aimed at the wrong thing. Or was it? A crazy idea began to form in my mind. The next day, I walked into the playroom and didn't even mention his homework. Instead of a textbook, I placed a simple, off-the-shelf model kit on the table in front of him. It was a basic set of plastic gears, axles, and pulleys. The kind of thing you get at a hobby shop for $20. It felt laughably cheap next to the platinum-plated toys surrounding us. Leo stopped drawing. For the first time, he lifted his head and looked directly at me. His eyes, a deep, intelligent blue, were startling. He looked from my face to the box, and then back to his drawing. An unreadable expression crossed his face. I held my breath, feeling like I was trying to coax a wild animal out of hiding. This was it. This would either work, or I'd be packing my bags by nightfall. He slowly pushed his drawing across the table towards me. It was the catapult design. Then he pointed a small, steady finger at the cheap plastic box I had brought. His voice, when it finally came, was quiet, clear, and utterly unexpected. It wasn't the voice of a failing student. It was the voice of an engineer. "This won't work," he said, his gaze unwavering. "The gear ratio you've brought is designed for basic rotational transfer. For the tension and release mechanism I've designed here," he tapped his drawing, "the required torque is exponentially higher. The plastic would shear apart on the first attempt." I stared at him, my mouth slightly agape. For a full 10 seconds, the only sound was the hum of the air purifier and the rain pattering against the panoramic window. I had a half-finished degree in child psychology, and every instinct, every textbook chapter I'd ever read, was screaming at me. This was it. This was the key. He wasn't lazy. He wasn't defiant. He was bored out of his mind. The school was trying to teach him how to add 2 + 2 while his brain was busy designing rocket ships. A slow smile spread across my face. I leaned forward, my voice barely a whisper. "Okay, Mr. Sterling, you're the engineer. Tell me what we need." It was like I had flipped a switch. His entire demeanor changed. The sullen, withdrawn boy vanished, replaced by an enthusiastic, albeit very serious, 10-year-old project manager. He grabbed a fresh sheet of paper and began sketching with a speed and precision that was mesmerizing. "The frame needs to be rigid to handle the torsion. Wood is better than plastic. We'll need dowels, not screws, for the primary joints to better distribute the stress. The arm needs a low mass, but high tensile strength. Carbon fiber would be ideal, but a properly reinforced balsa wood could work as a prototype. And the power source—" He paused, tapping the pencil against his chin. "Rubber bands are inefficient. The power curve is all wrong. A torsion spring system, like the ancient Roman ballistae, would provide a much more consistent launch velocity." I just listened, completely enthralled. He was using vocabulary I had to mentally scramble to understand. For the next hour, he didn't just talk, he lectured. He filled pages with diagrams, equations, and material lists. It was the most animated I had ever seen him. When our time was up, I didn't even look at his actual homework. I went online and, using my own credit card, ordered a curated list of materials based on his specifications. Balsa wood, miniature torsion springs, brass fittings, high-tension twine. It felt like a crazy gamble. Mr. Sterling wasn't paying me to build medieval siege weapons with his son. The next day, when Leo saw the box of supplies, his eyes lit up in a way no video game ever could. And so our real lessons began. His essay on my favorite summer activity became a technical manual on the principles and construction of a torsion-powered catapult. His math homework was suddenly relevant. He wasn't just solving for X, he was calculating trajectory arcs, force vectors, and material stress loads. I'd bring up a problem from his textbook, and he'd sigh. "That's a boring way to ask it." Then he'd rephrase it himself. "Okay, so if our projectile has a mass of 5 grams and the launch arm releases with 2 joules of energy, what's the initial velocity, assuming we ignore air resistance for now?" History was no longer about memorizing dates. It was about researching Archimedes, the siege of Syracuse, and the technological evolution of warfare. We built the catapult on the floor of his playroom. It was a masterpiece of miniature engineering. He taught me how to whittle the wood for a perfect fit, how to braid the twine into a powerful torsion spring. I saw the gears in his mind turning, connecting abstract concepts to tangible reality. He was brilliant, a true, honest-to-God genius. and the entire system had been trying to beat him into submission with multiplication tables and spelling bees. Of course, this idyllic workshop didn't go unnoticed. Mr. Sterling would occasionally pass the open door of the playroom, his face an unreadable mask of granite. He'd see us on the floor, surrounded by wood shavings and diagrams, and his lip would curl in a silent sneer. He was seeing a mess, not a method. He was seeing his defiant son playing with toys, and the latest tutor failing to rein him in. The daily reports I sent became more difficult to write. Progress. Excellent. Leo successfully calculated the optimal launch angle to hit a target 4 meters away. I knew how it sounded. I knew he thought I was just placating the boy. The pressure from him was a constant, low hum of disapproval. I felt like I was on borrowed time. One evening we were in the final stages of calibration. Leo had set up a small tower of plastic blocks on the far side of the room. He was meticulously adjusting the tension on the twine springs, making tiny, precise turns. A quarter turn more on the port side should correct the lateral drift, he murmured, more to himself than to me. The room was a disaster zone of creativity. Scraps of wood, failed prototypes, and pages of calculations were scattered everywhere. Suddenly the door swung open with a force that made us both jump. Alistair Sterling stood there, his face thunderous. His sharp eyes scanned the chaotic room, lingered on the half-finished catapult, and then landed on me with the force of a physical blow. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't have to. The Arctic chill that filled the room was more terrifying than any shout. "Miss Evans," he said, his voice dangerously quiet, "it appears you have mistaken my home for a carpenter's workshop and my son for your playmate. I believe our arrangement has come to an end." My blood ran cold. I scrambled to my feet, my mind racing for an explanation, a defense, anything. Wood shavings clung to my jeans. "Mr. Sterling, please, let me explain. This isn't what it looks like. This is how Leo learns." He took a slow, deliberate step into the room, his expensive leather shoes crunching on a stray piece of balsa wood. He looked at me as if I were a particularly disappointing species of insect. "It looks like you have spent the last 2 weeks wasting my money and my time. His grades have not improved. The school called me today. He submitted a 10-page blueprint of a trebuchet instead of his book report on Charlotte's Web. What? They are considering disciplinary action." He gestured dismissively at our project. "This is your idea of fixing him, by indulging his fantasies." Before I could answer, Leo spoke. His voice was small but steady, laced with a defiance I had never heard him direct at his father. "It's not a fantasy. It's applied physics." Alistair Sterling turned his glacial gaze upon his son. It was the first time I had ever seen them interact for more than a few seconds. There was no warmth, no paternal affection, just the cold appraisal of a chairman reviewing a failing subsidiary. "Applied physics will not get you a passing grade in English literature, Leo. It will not get you into the prep school I have selected for you, nor will it get you into the Ivy League university that is your birthright. It will get you nowhere." My heart broke for the little boy standing there, looking up at a father who saw his passion as a flaw. I had to do something. "Mr. Sterling," I said, my voice shaking slightly but firm, "you hired me to get results, and I have. You just aren't measuring the right ones. Your son isn't lazy or defiant. He's gifted. His mind doesn't work in the linear box-ticking way that school demands. He needs to see the practical application of a concept to understand it. He needs to build the equation, not just memorize it." "Enough," he snapped, his patience finally breaking. "I have heard enough excuses from 6 other tutors. You're no different. You've just found a more creative way to fail. Pack your things. Your final payment will be wired to your account." He turned to leave, the dismissal absolute. Panic surged through me. It wasn't just about the job anymore. It was about Leo. I couldn't let this man snuff out the brilliant spark I had just managed to fan into a flame. I had to make him see. "Wait!" I yelled, the sound echoing in the cavernous room. Alistair Sterling stopped, his back still to me. "One shot," I said, my voice gaining strength. "That's all I ask. Let Leo show you." He turned around slowly, an eyebrow arched in cynical amusement. "Show me what, Miss Evans?" "How to make a bigger mess." I gestured to the catapult. "Let him show you what he's learned." I walked over to the other side of the room and picked up a small, polished stone from a decorative vase. It was smooth and heavy, about the size of a marble. I placed it on the floor next to the block tower Leo had built. Then I walked back and stood next to Leo, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. He was trembling slightly, but his eyes were fixed on his father with a new, determined light. Mr. Sterling looked from the tiny catapult to the distant stone. A humorless smirk touched his lips. It was clear he found the entire situation pathetic. "Very well. You have 60 seconds to impress me before I call security." The challenge hung in the air. This was our only chance. I looked at Leo, and he looked at me. I gave him a small, encouraging nod. The fate of my job, and more importantly, Leo's future, rested on this single, ridiculous, miniature siege weapon. Leo took a deep breath. His focus absolute. He was no longer a child in a playroom. He was an engineer in his lab. He knelt, his eyes scanning his creation. He made a final, microscopic adjustment to the torsion spring, his fingers moving with practiced confidence. He measured the distance to the target with his eyes, his lips moving silently as he ran calculations through his head. The tension in the room was thick enough to taste. My heart hammered against my ribs. Alistair Sterling crossed his arms, tapping his foot impatiently, the picture of condescending disbelief. Leo placed a small wooden projectile, a tiny dowel he'd whittled to a point, into the catapult's arm. He looked up at his father, his blue eyes clear and unwavering. Then, with a flick of his finger, he triggered the release mechanism. Twang! The sound was small, but sharp in the tense silence of the room. The catapult's arm whipped forward with incredible speed. For a split second, the tiny wooden projectile was just a blur. It soared across the vast expanse of the playroom in a perfect, graceful arc. It didn't hit the stone. It didn't even land near it. It struck the precise center of the top plastic block in Leo's tower, a target no bigger than a postage stamp, 4 meters away. The block flew backward, striking the wall with a soft clack. The rest of the tower remained perfectly, impossibly still. A direct hit, executed with surgical precision. Alistair Sterling's impatient foot-tapping stopped. His arms slowly uncrossed. He stared at the undisturbed tower, then at the single displaced block against the wall. He blinked as if trying to reboot his own internal processor. The condescending smirk was gone, replaced by a look of stunned, utter disbelief. He looked from the result of the launch back to the intricate little machine on the floor, and finally, his gaze settled on his son. For the first time, he wasn't looking at a disappointing heir or a failing student. He was looking at the mind that had conceived and executed that perfect shot. Leo didn't look triumphant. He just looked at his father, his expression calm, as if the outcome had never been in doubt. "The initial velocity was approximately 15 meters per second," he said quietly. "I accounted for a 0.2-degree downward compensation for gravitational pull over the 4-meter distance. The tower was just for demonstration. The real target was the stone." He walked over to where the decorative stone lay on the floor. He pointed to a minuscule chip on its surface, a tiny white mark that was almost invisible against the polished gray. "The projectile grazed the stone right here," he explained, tracing the trajectory with his finger. "It was designed to ricochet off the stone at a 33-degree angle to strike the primary target. It was a 2-part calculation." I held my breath. He hadn't just hit the target. He had executed a trick shot so complex, so ridiculously precise, that it bordered on magic. It was a flawless demonstration of predictive physics. Alistair Sterling walked slowly across the room. He knelt, a gesture so uncharacteristic that it felt like the world was tilting on its axis. He ran a finger over the tiny chip on the stone, then looked at the complex braiding of the catapult's twine springs. He picked up one of Leo's discarded pages of calculations, his sharp eyes scanning the complex equations. The silence stretched on, thick and heavy. I felt like my entire future was being weighed and measured in that moment. Finally, he looked up at Leo. The icy mask was gone. In its place was something I never thought I'd see on Alistair Sterling's face: wonder. And beneath it, a flicker of something that looked devastatingly like shame. You did this?" he asked, his voice rough, stripped of its usual authority. Leo just nodded. Alistair stood up and turned to me. His expression was completely transformed. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a raw, unsettling humility. "Miss Evans," he said, and my name sounded different in his mouth now. "It seems I owe you, and my son, an apology." He looked around the messy playroom, but now he saw it with new eyes. He saw the laboratory, the crucible of genius. I have been trying to force a square peg into a round hole, a very, very brilliant square peg. He sighed, a deep, weary sound. "What does he need?" he asked me, the question genuine. "Forget the school, forget the tutors. What does he need?" "He needs a challenge," I said, my voice steady. "He needs tools, not toys. He needs problems to solve, not facts to memorize. He needs a teacher who can keep up with him." Mr. Sterling looked at his son, truly looked at him, for what felt like the first time. A slow, genuine smile, the first I'd ever seen, touched his lips. It changed his entire face. "Well," he said, his voice regaining some of its command, but softened with a new warmth. "It appears he already has one. My contract wasn't terminated. It was rewritten. My title changed from nanny to Director of Applied Education. My salary was doubled. The playroom was transformed into a state-of-the-art workshop, complete with 3D printers, CNC machines, and a budget that made my head spin. We didn't throw out Leo's school curriculum. We translated it. A history lesson on the Industrial Revolution became a project to design and build a functional miniature steam engine. Biology became the study of biomechanics, culminating in a robotic arm that could mimic muscle and tendon movement. Mr. Sterling started coming home early. He wouldn't interfere, but he'd stand in the doorway of the workshop for hours, just watching his son, a look of quiet pride on his face. Leo blossomed. He was no longer a quiet, withdrawn boy. He was confident, articulate, and pathologically curious. He was still a genius, but now he was also a happy 10-year-old. I realized I hadn't just fixed Leo. I had helped fix a family. And in the process, a lost psychology student who was just trying to make rent had found her true calling. I wasn't just a tutor anymore. I was the person who got to hand a genius his blueprints.